Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back with another video from Annie News. He's got another cut content video for Season 1 of That Time I Was Reincarnated as a Slime. I think it's interesting that so much stuff was cut out of the first season. So let's see what else was not put in.
Last video I talked about the time that Rimuru became an adventurer.
Good video.
It was an entire arc that took place during his journey to Inglesia, which for some reason didn't make it into the
It seemed really decent as well.
We did see a brief portion of it in the Season 2 opening, but what we saw there was only the first part of the arc. The second part dealt with a lot more world building. There was a whole plethora of...
Which I think is weird. Why would you cut some important world building stuff out?
Some of them act the way that they do in the future. In addition to that, we're also formally introduced to the organization known as the Council of the West, as well as Hinata's personal group of paladins known as the Crusaders.
Oh, cool!
So, this may not be as action-packed as what I had talked about last video, but the political and economic discourse that happens here is, in my opinion, just as interesting. It was only a few moments after Rimuru's test had finished that the Guildmaster Fuse made his appearance to express his anger over Cabal's foolish decision.
Right.
As it turns out, the three of them were actually ordered to bring Rimuru directly to him. There weren't supposed to be any unintentional detours.
Oh, right, okay, that's quite funny.
They risked the very safety of Plummet itself. You see, Fuse was pretty concerned that had something happened to Rimuru, then it would most definitely have been the Kingdom of Plummet that would face the consequences.
Right.
That's why he wanted Rimuru to be escorted to him as fast as possible.
Quickly.
Since he could have just used his Guildmaster rank to give Rimuru a B rank anyway. The combat test...
Oh my god, yeah, okay, cool.
So, everything that had happened prior was just unnecessary attention towards a new adventurer with
That's brilliant.
Luckily for him, because every person watching was at highest a C rank adventurer, it was likely they didn't even understand what Rimuru had done to beat this lesser demon. Had a B or A rank witnessed this new magic aura ability though, then it would have only been a matter of time until the news of a new demon-slaying adventurer had spread throughout the guild. At which point privacy would be the last thing Rimuru would get.
Yep.
In any case, it was after Fuse had calmed down that all of Rimuru's requests were taken care of. Not only was he given the written letter of recommendation to meet Grandmaster Yuki, but he was also given his official guild ID.
Alright, so that's why he was given the stuff to go see him, right?
Allow him to travel to the next
I need to sneeze.
without any issues.
Excuse me.
That Rimuru needed to do moment, but it was right before he could leave that Fuse went on to offer him an opportunity he simply couldn't refuse.
I think Fuse looks better in the anime than he does in the manga.
So, since this was a chance to build friendly relations with another neighboring kingdom,
Go for
Rimuru decided to set aside his primary mission and see what this king had to say.
Of course.
It was a royal
Sounds very much like Rimuru.
in 3 days' time. The topic of which would focus on the practical issues surrounding their nation's relationship. In the meantime, though, the issues in which this conversation was to focus on was first to be determined by a meeting with a low-level noble who goes by the name of Barryard.
Cool name.
Barryard. After was simply meant to serve as a means to finalize any agreements Rimuru and this noble had come to make with each other. So, as the two spent the rest of the day discussing how to open up their kingdoms to each other, the entirety of their negotiations ended up being condensed into 2 main agreements. The first was a guarantee of mutual security.
Okay.
Should either kingdom end up falling into danger, then
the other one would
work to provide as much support as possible.
Sweet, makes sense.
This was especially beneficial for Plummet, because as a smaller kingdom with a weaker military, handling each and every disaster wasn't something they could do on their own.
Yeah, you need help.
In fact,
you need friends.
For this very reason that up until now, the Free Guild had been subcontracted to handle all threats related to the monsters. That being the case, the support that Rimuru and Tempest was obliged to offer was simply accommodations and supplies for the adventurers working in the forest.
Okay.
In exchange, the influx of new people into the city would provide much more business to Tempest's economy. On paper, this was certainly a favorable arrangement for both parties. I mean, both would have an ally that they could rely on, and both would receive services that the others supposedly needed. But after really thinking about what Plummet could actually offer, it was pretty clear that they were gaining much more than Tempest was. Security wasn't really much of an issue in the first place, but considering the threats that Rimuru has faced up until now, this wasn't an area he thought Plummet would be very helpful in at all. Then, considering the high standard of living and quality of goods that Tempest provided, it was highly unlikely that low-level adventurers could even afford it. That, however, wasn't reason enough to turn down the agreement.
Okay.
So, instead, Rimuru made a decision that would act as a sort of compromise. He would provide support to the adventurers wherever he could, but he would do so in a manner more befitting to what they could actually afford.
Okay,
what this entailed was a separate, more simple type of lodging, as well as a basic facility in which they could use to buy equipment and
Alright, cool.
weapon maintenance. The The only issue with this was the time it would take to train Kurobe's apprentices into full-on craftsmen.
Okay.
Only after a suitable
So kind of providing like a
could this
cheaper
area for
version
adventurers.
of everything they have to offer. Okay.
Now, with that being the first agreement, the second was more for the benefit of Tempest. It was the mutual permission for any resident of either nation to travel freely to and within the other nation.
Okay, that's cool.
While regular citizens can do so for free, merchants on the other hand would need to be taxed. Especially since Rimuru had already promised that guild-related merchants couldn't be taxed. So, should any Blument-related merchants seek to do business in Tempest, then it was a necessity they be taxed, since not doing so would completely undermine the agreement Rimuru had made with Fuse. At first, Berryard was pretty hesitant to accept that. But because Rimuru was so lenient with regards to the security pact, he decided that he could give a bit of leeway on this one.
Yeah, I mean, give and give.
Besides, there wasn't really any option for him to...
Each side needs to be offering up something.
Negotiations had ended, it was pretty evident that Berryard had a more thorough understanding of Tempest's importance than even Rimuru did. The highways alone were an asset that couldn't be ignored, so Berryard knew that he needed to do everything to get on beneficial terms early. But anyway, those were the terms of the alliance.
There we go.
As for when it came to formalizing it with the king, the discussion was much less thorough and more so a summary of what had happened earlier. It was a much briefer encounter than Rimuru had imagined. Once it ended, though, Rimuru came to a sudden realization as to why the king was so agreeably passive in the first place.
And that
You
was...
see, the entire negotiation was just a scheme to get Tempest to agree to defend Blument. Their
Oh.
primary concern was never really mutual passage or the support of their adventurers, but instead a powerful force that could help defend them against the invading forces of the Eastern Empire.
Oh, okay. Wow,
It was
sneaky.
a revelation that became painfully clear when the king outright mentioned it.
Oh, okay. You just
The
literally
reason
told
for
him,
this
right? Okay.
was because Rimuru never did consider the fact that monsters weren't the only threat Blument could possibly face. The entire time he was negotiating with Berryard, he completely overlooked the fact that an invasion was fully possible as well.
Right, yeah, just think about demons, demons, and demons. That's all they've been fighting against, isn't it?
Scheme of things, any sort of customs revenue that Tempest could make from Blument completely paled in comparison to the defense budget Blument had gained from Tempest. It's as if they had just hired the greatest army in the world to defend them against literally anything.
Yeah.
All for the small
Wow.
price of a few travel taxes. Now, despite feeling frustrated
Decent
for having been played,
deal.
Rimuru did understand that the fault was entirely his.
Oh, mate.
He actually respected the old man's ability to manipulate him the way he did. And because of this painful lesson, he now knew that he needed to be less concerned with maintaining a good standing with others, and instead approach these types of things with only the best interests of Tempest in mind. That being the case, Rimuru wasn't about to leave Blument
Lesson
without taking
learned.
what he'd just lost. There was still one last card
Wow,
in
God.
order to regain the competitive advantage. That's why right before he was about to leave for Ingracia, he went to go see Berryard one more time to make what was essentially a sales pitch. As for what he was selling, well, that would be the full potion that had the same regenerative effects as Holy Magic.
Ah.
To us, that may not seem like that big of a deal, but to the people of Blument, this was an invaluable asset that had the potential to change everything. Not only would it disrupt the entire market, but both Fuse and Berryard knew that it could change the very fundamentals of war and politics.
Yeah, of course.
It was
Jesus
much
Christ,
more than
it
just
changes a lot of things.
Perhaps even a product that was too valuable to make publicly available. The reason why this is because the ability to restore lost limbs was simply way too powerful.
Yo.
Up until now, the only known instance of this type of healing belonged to the church. Very
Oh.
few people were capable of casting the holy spell Regeneration.
It's a holy
It was
spell,
really
right.
only members of the church who ranked as a bishop or higher. So, with this type of power exclusive only to a single entity, it made sense that a lot of other kingdoms would be searching for a way to replicate it, much to the point that they would even kill for it. This was the aspect of his potion that Rimuru didn't consider. It wasn't as if he made a mistake in revealing it, but to sell it as a basic commodity would invite far too much unwanted attention.
Definitely.
That's why both Fuse and Berryard decided to keep it a secret, instead choosing to sell the lesser effective high potions. Since this
Right,
was
okay.
a solution that was only 1/20th potency of the full potion, the product would still be superior to most other medicines in the market, but it wouldn't be something that kingdoms would want to fight over.
Yeah, it's not gonna like
It would also
completely
achieve
stand out and
these
everyone's like,
primary
whoa,
goals
gotta
which
have
is
it.
why they named for Tempest. By spreading these potions out into the world, so too would the merit of this new city of Tempest. Slowly but surely, people would become aware of this peaceful monster federation's existence. That was pretty much all Rimuru wanted. He just wanted to build as many friendly relations with the humans.
Yeah, he just wants to be everyone's mate, doesn't he?
Now, aside from all these negotiations, the rest of the time in Blument was spent gathering information. intelligence relating to the continent's current state of affairs, as well as anything that could be relevant to Tempest. One of the more important bits of knowledge Rimuru had come across was a particular organization consisting of quite a few nations surrounding the Great Forest of Jura. It was a group of representatives from each participating nation who gathered together to create what's known as the Council of the West.
The Council of the
all the
West.
nations who had joined forces to create this council, the three most notable were Blumond, Farmis, and then Ingracia.
Right.
Initially, they had done so in order to establish a joint force against the threat of the monsters. I mean, in a world as harsh as this, cooperation was definitely a key to survival.
Yeah, seems it.
But as time went
Jesus.
on, the council quickly grew into an international power intended to handle internal affairs and prevent inner conflict. It was kind of like a United Nations with a hell of a lot more influence, the core of which could be found at Ingracia.
Right.
As the geographical center between all the other nations, it only made sense to locate the council's headquarters here, especially since they were the only nation who didn't share a border with the Forest of Jura. That by itself made their kingdom fundamentally safer than all the others. Now, despite not having its own military force, the council still possessed some of the most power in the entire continent. Reason being that many members of the council possessed immense economic and political influence.
They got power.
So much so that they'd actually become the primary benefactor of the guild itself. What this meant was that the council held the exclusive right to give orders to the guild and all of its adventurers. So, as long as funding continued to be received from each participating nation, that nation would continue to possess a voice that could influence both the guild and the state of local affairs. Not only that, but the more money a nation would give, the more speaking rights they would possess over the other nations. It was pretty much a pay-to-win method of gaining influence. Should a nation stop paying, though, then that would indicate their intent to leave the council. Their status as a member would be revoked, and any protective services their nation previously received from the guild would be completely removed. This was the primary reason why many nations continued to support the council with massive amounts of funding.
Fair enough.
Setting aside the council now, there was another piece of information that Rimuru found to be quite interesting. And that was the way religion had spread itself throughout the Western nations. Part of the reason why the Western nations were so strongly connected was their absolute faith in the Western Holy Church and its sole deity Luminous.
Oh, right, okay.
It's a little bit complicated with the way it currently is, but the basics behind how this religion works goes something like this.
Right, okay, here we go.
The Western nations is the domain in which the Church has the most influence over.
Okay.
Then, the domain of the Church is actually a separate place known as the Holy Empire of Lubelius. Officially speaking, the Church doesn't really run the Holy Empire. One is a completely independent organization, and the other is its own separate country.
Okay.
That said, the Empire is run by a person known as the Holy Emperor, a pope-like entity who passes on the supposed will of the deity Luminous. It wouldn't be wrong to say that this emperor was connected to the Church, but it also wouldn't be right to say that he was fully controlled by them. It was a complicated relationship in which Lubelius could be seen as this kind of puppet state, but at the same time not really be one. In any case, despite there being other religions in the world, Luminous was by far the biggest, mainly because they had the backing of the Paladins.
Wow, they look cool.
What these Paladins were was a group of Crusader-like warriors who were widely considered to be the strongest knights on the planet. They were a small army of...
It's reminding me of the Espada.
Each possessed a strength that was well above the A rank, making them extremely proficient at slaying any and all types of
They
monsters.
do look cool.
While many believed this group to be the defenders of righteousness, Rimuru felt that there was something odd about them.
A bit off, yeah.
I mean, for a group who prides themselves as the defenders of the Western nations, they're actually fairly quick to turn their back on any person who doesn't follow the one god Luminous. If you were a practitioner of a different religion, then the so-called Crusaders would deem you unworthy to receive Luminous's salvation.
Oh.
In other words, it meant that they would just leave you to die.
Damn.
When Rimuru heard that this was how they operated, it made him think that perhaps these warriors weren't as righteous as everyone thought them to be. At the very
Seem
least,
very
they were
wrongtious.
that he needed to be aware of, especially since they took such a harsh stance against monsters. Plus, considering that their main officer was none other than Hinata Sakaguchi, a confrontation with them was more than inevitable. For now, though, Rimuru knew that he needed to keep his distance.
Keep you
He could
cool.
only imagine how powerful the strongest knight of the greatest knight force actually was. So, a lot more information was going to be needed before any sort of moves could be
Stack
made.
up on that knowledge.
But yeah, that's pretty much it for the adventure arc that took place before the Summoned Children arc. If this was a video that you enjoyed, then
That's
be
cool.
sure to let
Yeah,
me
that's
know
cool.
and subscribe.
I like
since we're
seeing,
doing
like, all the
more
stuff that's
coming
cut out.
throughout this season. If you want to read the story for yourself, though, then don't forget that you can use the link below to access Bookwalker's summer sale.
Okay.
Plus, if it's your first time buying from them, then you can also use code ANYNEWS to get $5 off your first ebook purchase. It's honestly a great way to support both the industry and the channel. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time.
Ciao. That was cool. It's nice to see all the little differences and changes and stuff that's cut out. It's not like massively important to the story, but it does explain why certain people are the way that they are. So yeah. Anyway, thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video that I upload, link is in the description to the Patreon page. $1 a month is all I ask to help support the channel. And thank you guys very much for watching. What do you guys think of that? Do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already, leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.